The Johnson family had been waiting for this vacation for months. David Johnson, a tall man in his mid-40s, had spent weeks planning every small detail. He wanted it to be perfect, not only for himself but especially for his wife Lisa and their two children, Marcus and Kayla. Life had been busy and sometimes heavy, so this trip was their chance to breathe, laugh, and create new memories together. David woke up early the morning of the trip, quietly moving around the house so as not to wake anyone. The smell of coffee filled the air, and as he sipped his cup, he looked around at the suitcases neatly packed by the door. He felt a sense of pride. For outsiders, David looked like any other hard-working father who simply wanted a holiday with his family. But behind his calm eyes was a secret identity that even his neighbors didn't know. He was an FBI agent. He was used to long hours, hidden operations, and dangerous assignments. But he never told his kids about that part of his life. To them, he was just dad, and that was exactly how he wanted it to stay during this trip. When Lisa came into the kitchen, still sleepy but smiling, David whispered, "Ready to go make some memories?" She laughed and nodded, pouring herself a quick cup of tea. Their children soon joined them, dragging small backpacks and stuffed toys, their voices full of excitement. The car was loaded with snacks, extra blankets, and the kind of cheerful playlist that promised road trip fun. As the family drove out of their neighborhood, the early sun painted the sky in soft shades of gold. The kids played car games, shouting answers and giggling, while Lisa took photos of the passing scenery. David kept his eyes on the road, though his heart was light. For once, he didn't have to think about serious matters. For once, he could just be a husband and father. Hours passed with laughter and music. The Johnsons stopped at gas stations, picked up ice cream cones, and even pulled over at a roadside stand to buy fresh fruit. Marcus and Kayla argued over who got the bigger peach, and Lisa had to play referee while David chuckled quietly. These little moments filled the car with warmth and joy. By the time they entered the small coastal town where they would stay, the sun was beginning to lower, glowing gently against the horizon. The family was enchanted by the colorful houses, the smell of the sea breeze, and the friendly chatter of people walking along the sidewalks. David slowed down the SUV so everyone could take in the view. Kayla pointed excitedly at a carousel near the beach, and Marcus pressed his face against the window, eager to run across the sand. It seemed like the perfect day. But sometimes, even perfect days can carry shadows. Just as David turned onto a quieter street, bright flashing lights appeared behind the car. A police siren wailed. Marcus and Kayla grew quiet, their smiles fading as the car slowed to a stop. Lisa's hand instinctively reached for David's arm, her eyes filled with concern. David, keeping his voice calm, told the children, "It's okay. Don't be scared. Daddy will handle this." The police cruiser parked behind them. Two officers stepped out, their faces stern. One approached the driver's side, while the other circled the SUV, eyeing the family inside as though they didn't belong. David rolled down his window, hands resting firmly on the steering wheel, every movement careful and deliberate. "License and registration," the officer said curtly, his tone sharp, almost accusing rather than polite. David nodded and handed over the documents without protest. He had been through countless tense encounters in his professional life, but this was different. This was not an undercover sting or a crime scene. This was his family's vacation, and his children were watching. The officer glanced at the papers, then looked back at David with narrowed eyes. "Where are you heading?" David answered softly, "Just a family vacation. We rented a house near the beach." The officer didn't respond kindly. Instead, he peered into the back seat, his eyes scanning Marcus and Kayla before turning to Lisa. His partner joined him, standing tall with folded arms. "This car looks out of place here," the second officer said slowly, as if trying to find a reason to doubt. Lisa's heartbeat quickened. She felt her phone in her lap and quietly pressed the record button, just in case. She didn't want to think about it, but she knew situations like this could sometimes turn unfair, especially for families who looked like hers. Inside the car, the children whispered to each other, their voices nervous. David kept his face neutral, his voice steady. He knew that showing frustration would only make things worse. He also knew something the officers didn't, that they were speaking to someone who understood the law and the rights of citizens more deeply than most. But this was not the time to reveal it. Not yet. The officers exchanged a look, as if silently deciding their next move. The atmosphere grew heavier. What had started as a happy road trip was now sliding into a moment that felt uncertain and wrong. Lisa's recording continued quietly, her hands trembling just a little, while David's grip on the steering wheel remained firm. Behind them, the coastal town looked bright and peaceful. Ahead of them, the beach still called with promise. But in that small stretch of road where flashing lights painted the SUV in red and blue, the Johnsons found themselves standing at the edge of a storm they had never expected. And though no one knew it yet, the officers were moments away from learning a truth that would change everything. The Johnsons sat in their SUV with the flashing red and blue lights dancing across the windows. The children were silent now, their excitement about the beach gone in a second. David's calm face hid the storm brewing inside him. He had dealt with tension many times before in his FBI career, but never like this, with his family sitting beside him, watching every move. The officer holding David's license leaned against the car, taking his time. His partner stood by Lisa's window, staring inside as if waiting to catch something wrong. Lisa's fingers tightened around her phone, which was still recording in her lap. She prayed her kids wouldn't cry, because she knew that any sound could be twisted against them. "Step out of the vehicle," the officer finally said. His tone wasn't just official, it was sharp, almost like a command meant to intimidate. David's chest rose slowly as he inhaled. He opened the door, moving carefully so the officers could see his hands. Years of FBI training taught him that staying calm and visible was the safest choice. Lisa whispered, "Be careful," as he stepped onto the pavement. Marcus and Kayla's eyes followed every move their father made. Once outside, the officer walked around David, almost circling him. "This car," he said, "matches the description of a stolen vehicle." His partner nodded, as if rehearsed. David responded evenly, "This is a rental car. My paperwork is in the glove compartment. My wife can show you if you'd like." But the officer didn't ask for the paperwork. Instead, he narrowed his eyes. "Where are you from?" "New York," David answered calmly. "We're here for a family vacation." The second officer smirked. "Long way to drive for a vacation. Why here?" Inside the car, Lisa felt her heart sink. She could hear the tone. It wasn't about the car anymore. It was about who they were. The officers didn't look at the children's worried faces. They didn't look at Lisa, who was biting her lip in silence. They just stared at David, searching for something that wasn't there. Minutes dragged on like hours. The officers asked the same questions over and over, circling back as if hoping David would slip. But David remained composed. His FBI experience gave him discipline, but inside, his stomach churned with anger. His children were learning a painful lesson in real time, one he had hoped they would be spared from, at least for a few more years. Finally, the officer at David's side leaned toward his partner and muttered, "We'll take him in. Call the tow for the car." Lisa's breath caught in her throat. "Take him in? For what?" she asked, her voice shaking but strong enough to be heard. The officer at her window didn't answer. Instead, he opened her door. "Ma'am, step out as well." Marcus shouted. She didn't do anything. His young voice broke the heavy air, and Kayla began to cry softly. "Quiet down," the officer barked at the children, but David turned sharply, his voice firm yet calm. Do not raise your voice at my children. The officer stiffened, caught off guard by David's quiet authority, but then pushed back, You're under suspicion. Until we clear this up, you're coming with us. Handcuffs clicked around David's wrists. Lisa was pulled gently but firmly from the car. The children sat inside, crying, pressing their faces against the window as they watched their parents restrained like criminals. Onlookers began to gather at a distance, murmuring. Some pulled out their phones, recording. David's heart ached, not from the cold steel on his wrists, but from the fear in his children's eyes. Every fiber in him wanted to reveal his badge, to end this instantly. But part of him waited to see just how far these officers would take this injustice. Lisa's phone, still recording, captured everything: the harsh tones, the unnecessary cuffs, the children's frightened cries. She kept her chin high, even as tears stung her eyes. She knew they were being humiliated, but she also knew that the truth would one day shine through. The Johnsons were placed in the back of the police cruiser, the very sight drawing more attention from passing drivers. Inside the car, Marcus whispered, Mommy, are we going to jail? Lisa pulled her children close and whispered back, No, baby. We didn't do anything wrong. David sat in silence, his mind racing. He thought of every family who had faced moments like this without protection. He thought of the quiet promises he had made to himself when he became an agent that he would stand for justice, even when it was hard. And now, justice was being denied to him in the most personal way possible. As the cruiser pulled away, the vacation town's cheerful lights looked far away, almost unreachable. The beach, the carousel, the laughter, it all felt like another world. The Johnsons' vacation had turned into a nightmare, and none of the officers knew that the man they had just cuffed was someone who had sworn to uphold the very laws they claimed to represent. And soon, the truth was going to catch up with them. The ride to the police station was silent except for the crackle of the radio and the hum of the engine. David sat with his hands cuffed behind him, staring straight ahead, while Lisa held the children close. The kids leaned against her, wide-eyed and frightened, not understanding why their family trip had turned into something so heavy. When they arrived, the officers led David out first. He didn't resist, he simply walked with measured steps, his shoulders straight, his head high. Lisa followed, guiding the children carefully. The bright fluorescent lights of the station's entrance felt harsh after the warm glow of the evening sun. People inside looked up as the family was escorted in, whispering quietly at the unusual sight of a mom, dad, and two children being marched through the lobby in handcuffs. At the front desk, one officer tossed David's license onto the counter. Picked them up near the beach. Possible stolen vehicle. His tone was confident, as though his decision needed no proof. The desk clerk, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes, glanced from the papers to the family. Her expression showed uncertainty. With kids? She asked softly, almost as if questioning the sense in it. Yeah, the officer replied curtly. We'll sort it out. David said nothing. He let the process unfold, because he knew the moment of truth was coming. He had played this kind of patience game many times before, though never in a situation that struck so close to home. The Johnsons were led to a holding area. David was separated from Lisa and the children, placed on a bench in a smaller room with his cuffs still on. Lisa and the kids sat together on another bench across the hall, surrounded by cold gray walls. Kayla leaned into her mother, whispering, I want to go home. Lisa brushed her daughter's hair back gently. We will, baby. We will. Back in his holding room, David watched the officers through the glass as they spoke in hushed tones. He could see their unease beginning to show. They hadn't run his identification properly yet, and he knew that once they did, everything would change. But he wanted them to take that step themselves. He wanted them to see the weight of their mistake without him having to shout it. An hour passed. The children grew restless, and Lisa's patience wore thin, though she kept her calm front for them. The officers finally returned to David's room. One of them dropped his wallet on the table and said, "We need you to confirm your details again." David nodded. "Run it carefully this time," he said evenly, his voice steady but carrying a quiet authority that made the officers pause. The first officer frowned but entered the information into the computer at the desk. As the system processed, the room fell silent. Then the screen displayed his record: Special Agent David Johnson, Federal Bureau of Investigation. The officer's jaw tightened. His partner leaned in, reading the screen twice as if he couldn't believe it. Their confident postures melted into something else: unease, even fear. David watched them, his expression unchanged. He didn't gloat, didn't smirk. He simply said, "Now you understand who I am. And more importantly, you understand what you've done tonight to my family." The officers exchanged a look. Their arrogance had drained away, replaced with pale faces and stiff movements. They mumbled to each other before stepping out of the room, clearly shaken. A few minutes later, the door to Lisa's holding area opened. "You can go," one officer said awkwardly, avoiding eye contact. Lisa stood, holding her children's hands tightly, suspicion and anger flashing in her eyes. "Why?" she asked firmly. "What changed?" But the officer didn't answer her question. He simply gestured toward the exit. Meanwhile, in David's room, the cuffs were finally removed. The metal clinked against the table as he rubbed his wrists slowly, his movements deliberate. He didn't rush to leave. Instead, he leaned forward, his eyes steady on the officers. "I could report you right now. I could end your careers tonight. Do you understand that?" The officers swallowed hard. One of them stuttered, We made a mistake." David's voice grew quieter, but sharper. "A mistake is forgetting to use a turn signal. What you did was abuse of authority. You humiliated my wife, terrified my children, and violated the very oath you swore to uphold. You didn't just stop a family on vacation. You stopped an FBI agent, and you didn't even care to check properly before treating us like criminals." The silence in the room was heavy. David stood, straightened his jacket, and walked toward the door. Before leaving, he turned back once more. "I'll decide later how this will be handled. But for tonight, I need to get my family back to safety." Out in the lobby, Lisa and the kids ran to him. Marcus threw his arms around his father's waist, and Kayla clung to his hand. Lisa looked at him with tears in her eyes, both relieved and furious. David wrapped his arms around them all, whispering, "It's okay. We're going home." The Johnsons walked out of the station together, the cool night air hitting their faces like a reminder that freedom was theirs again. But the wound of the evening lingered, deep and sharp. Their vacation had been broken open by suspicion and prejudice. And though David had not yet decided what steps he would take next, he knew one thing with absolute: the night after their release from the police station, the Johnson family stayed in their rental house by the beach. But the mood was nothing like what they had imagined when they first planned this vacation. Instead of laughter, the rooms were filled with silence. Marcus and Kayla sat close to their parents, afraid to let them out of sight. The simple joy of building sandcastles and eating ice cream cones now seemed far away. David sat quietly on the porch, the ocean waves crashing in the distance. His mind was restless. He replayed every second of the arrest, every tear in his children's eyes, every uneasy look on Lisa's face. He knew this night would live in their memories for years. He also knew he had to decide what came next. Should he file an official complaint? Should he use his badge and his authority to make sure those officers were held accountable? Or should he protect his family from more public attention by letting it go? Lisa stepped out with 2 cups of tea and sat beside him. "You kept calm," she whispered, "but I know inside you were burning." David sighed. "I've dealt with men like them before. But never while holding my kids' hands. He turned toward her. I can't ignore it. What message would that send to Marcus and Kayla? That silence is the answer. Lisa nodded slowly. She understood. The next morning, the town was buzzing. Videos recorded by bystanders at the roadside and in the police station lobby had already spread online. Clips of the Johnsons being handcuffed, Lisa's trembling voice asking, "For what?" and the frightened faces of the children were everywhere. And then came the biggest shock to everyone, the reveal that David was an FBI agent. Local newspapers picked up the story. Headlines read, "Vacationing family wrongly arrested, father turns out to be FBI agent and small town police under fire after vacation arrest." When the family stepped out to get breakfast that morning, people looked at them differently. Some approached to offer kind words, "We're sorry this happened to you here." Others avoided their gaze, embarrassed by the truth of what had unfolded in their town. Back at the police department, the atmosphere was tense. The two officers involved in the arrest had been pulled off duty pending investigation. The police chief, a man with years of service, knew the situation was serious. He scheduled a meeting with David and Lisa, hoping to calm the storm. When David entered the chief's office later that day, he walked in not as a victim, but as a man carrying quiet authority. Lisa sat beside him, steady and composed. The chief cleared his throat. "Mr. Johnson, Mrs. Johnson. I want to offer my deepest apologies. What happened should never have occurred." David leaned forward. "Chief, you don't have to tell me. I know exactly what happened. Those men didn't see my family. They saw what they wanted to see. And they acted on it without care for the truth." His voice was firm, each word deliberate. The chief nodded, shame flickering across his face. "We're reviewing everything. They'll face consequences." Lisa spoke up, her voice calm but sharp. "Consequences aren't just about them. It's about the example you set for the rest of your department. If this can happen to us, imagine who else it has happened to, people who didn't have a badge in their pocket." David's words carried even further weight. "I've worked cases across this country. I know how fragile trust in law enforcement already is. Your officers didn't just make a mistake, they broke trust. And that has to mean something." The meeting ended with promises of an investigation, but David knew promises weren't enough. Still, for now, he chose to step back, because his family needed healing more than anything. That evening, the Johnsons walked on the beach together. The children finally smiled again as they chased waves and picked seashells. David watched them and realized something important: resilience was their greatest strength. The world could try to humiliate them, but their unity as a family was unbreakable. Lisa slipped her hand into his. "We came here for memories," she said softly. "Maybe not the ones we expected, but ones our children will never forget. They'll remember how you stood tall. They'll remember how we stayed together." David nodded. "And they'll remember that truth always finds its way to the surface." Far away, the videos continued to spread, sparking conversations across communities about justice, dignity, and respect. But on that quiet stretch of sand, the Johnson family found their own peace again, holding each other, stronger than before, knowing that the storm had passed but the lesson would remain. Thought for 18 seconds. Morning light returned to the beach town like a gentle promise. The sky was soft and clear, and the ocean moved with a steady rhythm, as if reminding everyone that time keeps going, even after hard nights. The Johnson family woke up slowly in their rental house. For the first time since the arrest, the air felt a little lighter. David made pancakes in the small kitchen while Lisa sliced strawberries. Marcus and Kayla set the table with careful hands, stealing glances at their parents to make sure everything was okay. When they sat down, David looked at his family and said, "Today, we choose our memories." He meant it. They had lost one day to fear. They would not lose the rest to it. After breakfast, they walked to the beach together. The sand felt warm and friendly under their feet. Marcus ran ahead, racing the waves, and Kayla laughed when the water chased her back. Lisa took photos like she always did, but this time her pictures caught something new: courage returning to her family's faces. David stood with his hand over his eyes, watching the sea and thinking about what comes next. He was not running from what happened. He was walking toward it with intention. News of their experience continued to spread. People in town shared the videos and wrote messages of support. Some said they had never seen something like this happen here. Others said they had seen it before but never knew what to do. Now they were talking to each other in coffee shops, at bus stops, and even at the market. Conversations started where there had once been silence. The police chief called again. He asked David if he would attend a community meeting at the town hall that evening. He said leaders, neighbors, and officers would be there. He said they wanted to listen. David agreed. He didn't want revenge. He wanted change that stayed. Before the meeting, the chief asked if he could speak to the children. He came to the house with a gentle face and a tired voice. On the porch, he sat with Marcus and Kayla. He apologized to them simply and clearly. You deserved safety, he told them. You deserved respect. We failed you. The children listened. They did not fully understand laws and policies, but they understood kindness and responsibility when they heard it. When the chief left, he handed Kayla a small seashell he found on the beach. A reminder, he said softly, that good things can wash up after a storm. At the town hall, the room was full. Some people stood along the walls because all the chairs were taken. A few reporters sat quietly in the back. The two officers involved in the arrest were not there. The chief stood at the front and began with a short statement. He didn't make excuses. He did not hide behind complicated words. He said that the department failed, that trust was broken, and that he would welcome outside review to make sure this never happened again. He listed what they would do next: better training for everyone, clear checks before any major stop, a public complaint process that people could access easily, and regular meetings with the community not only after a problem, but before one could grow. Then he invited David to speak. The room grew very quiet. David stepped forward slowly. He looked out and saw many faces: curious, anxious, hopeful. He took a breath. My name is David Johnson, he said. I am a husband and a father. I am also a federal agent. But last night, none of that mattered to the officers who stopped us. What mattered to them were their assumptions. I am not here to shame anyone. I am here to ask us all to do better. He spoke simply, like a teacher explaining a hard idea with gentle words. He talked about dignity. He talked about staying calm when it is hardest. He talked about how rules are important, but the heart behind them is even more important. He told them what it felt like to see his children watch their parents in handcuffs, and how that memory would live inside them. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't point fingers. He just told the truth, and the truth carried its own power. Lisa spoke too. She said that she started recording because she has learned to protect her family. She said she wished she didn't have to. And then she said something that made the whole room lean closer: I don't want my children to grow up learning only how to defend themselves. I want them to grow up learning how to trust. Help us build a town where that is possible. Hands went up all over the room. People asked questions. A shop owner wondered how to speak up if he saw a stop that didn't feel right. A teacher asked what she could tell her students about their rights. A young officer asked for guidance on how to slow down a situation that felt tense, instead of making it worse. An older neighbor stood up and said, with a trembling voice, that he had made assumptions in his life and wanted to unlearn them. The room felt like it was breathing, uncomfortable, honest, changing. At the end, the mayor walked to the front. We cannot fix what happened, she said, but we can fix what happens next. She promised the public an independent review. She promised a timeline for changes. She promised that the findings would not sit in a drawer. She promised to bring them back to the same room, with the same people, to show what had been done. After the meeting, many residents came to the Johnsons. They brought small kindnesses, a handwritten note, a gift card for ice cream, directions to the best shell collecting spot on the beach. One woman hugged Lisa and said she hoped the town could deserve their forgiveness someday. Lisa thanked her. Forgiveness is not a light switch, she thought. It is a path. But she could see the path now. The next day, a letter arrived at the rental house. It was from the two officers. It did not try to explain away their choices. It did not ask the family to forget. It said they were sorry. It said they were entering extra training and meeting with a mentor who had a reputation for patient, fair service. It said they were willing to volunteer at youth programs if the family thought that would help. David read the letter twice. He did not know how long it would take for his anger to soften. But he knew apology is a door. It is not the whole house, but you cannot enter without it. That afternoon, the family went back to the boardwalk. Marcus pointed at the carousel he had wanted to ride on the first day. "Can we try now?" he asked. David smiled. "Yes. Let's ride." They each chose a painted horse. The music sparkled through the air. As the carousel turned, Lisa saw the reflection of her family in the mirrors moving, laughing, alive. She breathed out the weight she had been holding. It did not vanish, it became lighter. That evening, they flew a kite. The sky took on colors that looked like soft fruit, peach and apricot and gold. The kite pulled the string with eager energy, as if it was ready to race the wind. Marcus and Kayla took turns holding it while David steadied their hands. "You feel that pull?" he asked. "That's like truth. Sometimes it tugs. Sometimes you have to let the line out a little. But you don't let go. You guide it." On their last morning, they wrote postcards to themselves, a family habit they loved. Each person wrote a small note about what they wanted to remember most from the trip. Marcus wrote, "I was brave." Kayla wrote, "We found pretty shells." Lisa wrote, "We chose love and truth." David's card had only a few words: "Calm is strength. Respect is non-negotiable." Before they left town, the chief met them one more time. He handed David a printed plan with dates and steps, signed by the mayor and himself. "Hold us to this," he said. "Come back if you can. See if we kept our word." David took the papers and shook the chief's hand. "We will," he said. It was not a threat. It was a promise between adults who understood the work ahead. The drive home felt different from the drive in. The children napped, then woke up hungry, then sang along to the playlist again. They asked questions that showed how much they had grown in a few days. "Why do people assume?" Kayla asked softly. Lisa thought for a long moment and answered, "Sometimes people move faster than their hearts. We have to help them slow down." Marcus asked, "Will it happen again?" David stared at the road and said, "Sometimes life will ask us to be brave more than once. But we won't be alone." When they reached their city, the skyline looked both familiar and new. Home always looks different after you have learned something. They unpacked, did laundry, and placed the seashell the chief had given Kayla on a small shelf near the door. It sat there like a quiet teacher. Over the next few weeks, they kept in touch with the town. The mayor sent updates. The independent review began. Officers attended new workshops. The department held coffee chats in parks, inviting anyone to come and ask questions or share concerns. It was not perfect. Change never is. But it was real. And real change is worth more than perfect promises. One Saturday, David spoke at a youth center in his own city. He told the story without naming the town, without pointing at faces. He talked about staying calm, about knowing your rights, about choosing the kind of strength that doesn't break others. He showed the kids the same thing he showed his own family, a steady voice, a steady heart. Lisa helped plan a community day at a local park where families and officers played simple games, shared food, and learned each other's names. Small things add up. Small things make a road. Months later, the Johnsons took another trip, this time to a lake. The air smelled like pine. The water held the sky like a mirror. They built a small fire in a safe ring, made sandwiches, and watched the clouds drift. When the wind changed, David stood and lifted the old kite again. He handed the string to Marcus and Kayla together. "You know how to do it," he said. And they did. They laughed as the kite pulled and danced. Lisa snapped a photo at just the right moment, the line tight, the children's faces bright, David's hands steady at their shoulders. When she looked at the picture later, she realized why it felt perfect. It showed who they had become, not people defined by a bad night, but a family defined by how they walked through it. They kept the postcards on the fridge. They kept the seashell by the door. They kept their promise to each other, to choose their memories, to tell the truth, to trust in slow, steady change. The world would not turn soft just because they wished it. But their hearts could stay soft and strong at the same time. On a quiet evening, long after the news had moved on to other stories, David stood on their apartment balcony and watched the city lights blink like patient stars. He thought about the officers, the chief, the town hall, the carousel, the kite. He thought about the words on his postcard. Calm is strength. Respect is non-negotiable. He whispered them like a small prayer he could carry anywhere. Inside, Lisa tucked the children into bed. She kissed their foreheads and told them that tomorrow would be ordinary and beautiful. In the living room, the beach photos sat in a neat row on the shelf. In every picture, there was motion, waves moving, kites rising, a family walking forward. The storm had not taken that from them. It never would.